10. Z Ward, Glenside Hospital, South Australia. Z Ward was built in 1885 as part of the Glenside Hospital complex, originally known as the Parkside Lunatic Asylum. It was intended to house patients deemed criminally insane, individuals who had committed serious crimes but were considered mentally unfit to stand trial or be imprisoned in a regular facility. This ward was essentially a prison within a hospital, designed to keep dangerous individuals separate from the general population. The architecture of Z Ward reflected its purpose. The building was designed with heavy, secure doors, barred windows, and reinforced walls to prevent escape. It was constructed to be both physically and emotionally isolating, as the authorities believed that these patients needed to be kept away from society, often for their entire lives. The building's harsh design also mirrored the lack of understanding of mental illness during the late 19th century. At the time, people suffering from mental disorders were often treated more like criminals than patients in need of care. Inside the ward, patients were subjected to a range of treatments that were common for the era, many of which are now considered inhumane. Electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, hydrotherapy, and isolation were all used regularly. These methods were not only physically painful but also emotionally traumatic for the patients, many of whom spent years, if not their entire lives, inside the ward. As time went on, Z Ward became overcrowded, and conditions deteriorated. The patients housed there were some of the most mentally unstable individuals in the country, and the staff were often ill-equipped to handle them. Incidents of violence between patients and staff were not uncommon, and reports of abuse and neglect began to emerge. The combination of poor living conditions, harsh treatment methods, and the high level of mental instability among the patients created an environment that was rife with suffering and despair. Over time, the suffering that took place within the walls of Z Ward began to manifest in strange and unsettling ways. By the mid-20th century, stories of ghostly activity and hauntings began to circulate among the staff and the few visitors allowed inside. Many believed that the spirits of former patients, who had died in the ward under tragic circumstances, were still lingering in the building. Z Ward was officially closed in 1973, after nearly 90 years of operation. The closure came as mental health care in Australia began to shift away from large institutions and toward community-based care. However, even after its closure, the ward remained a place of fear and fascination. Paranormal investigators, ghost hunters, and curious visitors began to explore the abandoned building, and many reported experiencing strange phenomena. The building's reputation as a haunted location grew rapidly, fueled by reports of ghostly apparitions, disembodied voices, and inexplicable cold spots. People who visited Z Ward described feelings of intense unease, as if they were being watched by unseen eyes. Some even claimed to have been touched or pushed by invisible forces. These experiences led to the widespread belief that Z Ward was haunted by the spirits of the patients who had suffered and died within its walls. The paranormal activity reported at Z Ward has been both frequent and varied, with visitors and investigators encountering a range of strange and unsettling phenomena. Here are some of the most notable incidents and encounters associated with the building. 1. The ghostly figures in the hallways. One of the most common reports from visitors to Z Ward is the sighting of ghostly figures walking through the building's long, narrow hallways. These apparitions are often described as shadowy, indistinct shapes, but some witnesses claim to have seen figures in old-fashioned hospital uniforms or straitjackets. These sightings are usually brief, with the figures disappearing as soon as they are noticed. Some believe that these spirits are former patients who are still trapped within the ward, unable to find peace. 2. Disembodied voices and laughter. Another frequently reported phenomenon at Z Ward is the sound of disembodied voices and laughter. Visitors often hear what sounds like conversations or laughter coming from empty rooms or down long corridors. These sounds are often faint, as if coming from far away, but they are unmistakable. Some have speculated that these voices belong to the spirits of former patients, whose conversations and outbursts are still echoing through the building long after their deaths. 3. cold spots and sudden drops in temperature. Many people who visit Z Ward have reported feeling sudden, inexplicable drops in temperature, especially in certain areas of the building. These cold spots are often accompanied by feelings of unease or dread, as if something unseen is nearby. Paranormal investigators believe that these cold spots are a sign of ghostly activity, as spirits are said to draw energy from their surroundings, causing the temperature to drop. 4. Poltergeist activity. Poltergeist activity has also been reported at Z Ward, with objects moving on their own, doors slamming shut, and lights flickering without explanation. In some cases, visitors have claimed to have been physically touched or pushed by an unseen force. One particularly chilling report involved a visitor who felt a hand grip their arm, only to find that no one was there. These incidents have led many to believe that the spirits at Z Ward are not only present but actively interacting with the living. 5. The feeling of being watched. Perhaps one of the most unsettling experiences reported by visitors to Z Ward is the feeling of being watched. Many people who enter the building describe a sense of being followed or observed, even when they are alone. Some have even reported seeing eyes peering at them from dark corners or through the bars of cell doors. This pervasive sense of being watched has made Z Ward a particularly unnerving place to visit, even for seasoned paranormal investigators. Over the years, a number of rumors and legends have emerged about Z Ward, many of them centered around the idea that the building is haunted by the spirits of patients who died there under tragic circumstances. One persistent rumor is that a patient who was brutally murdered by another inmate still haunts the building, seeking revenge for his untimely death. This story is often told to explain the violent poltergeist activity that has been reported in the ward. Another legend involves the belief that Z Ward was a place of secret, unethical medical experiments. According to this rumor, doctors at the asylum conducted unauthorized experiments on patients, using them as test subjects for dangerous and painful procedures. While there is little historical evidence to support these claims, the harsh treatment methods used at the time have given rise to this chilling legend. Today, Z Ward is no longer in use as a mental health facility, but the building still stands, preserved as a historic site and a place of interest for paranormal enthusiasts. Ghost tours are regularly conducted at the site, drawing visitors who are eager to experience the eerie atmosphere and perhaps catch a glimpse of the spirits said to haunt the building. Thanks for watching. 9. North Head Quarantine Station, New South Wales. It holds 9th position in top 10 most haunted hospitals in Australia. It has been already discussed in my other video made on Australia's most haunted places. The link is in description. Please visit that video for all details about North Head Quarantine Station. 8. Kenmore Asylum, New South Wales. Kenmore Asylum was constructed in response to the growing need for psychiatric care in New South Wales during the late 19th century. At the time, mental illness was poorly understood, and large-scale asylums were seen as the best solution for housing and treating individuals with mental disorders. The asylum was built on a large estate in the Goulburn region, with the goal of providing a peaceful, therapeutic environment for its patients. The facility opened its doors in 1895 and was considered state-of-the-art for its time. Its design followed a similar pattern to other asylums built in Australia during this period, featuring large, airy wards, wide verandas, and expansive grounds where patients could walk and engage in physical activity. The idea behind the asylum's layout was to create a tranquil setting that would aid in the recovery of patients through a combination of rest and work, a common practice in psychiatric care during this era. Kenmore Asylum was initially seen as a progressive institution, with a focus on providing a more humane approach to mental health care than had been seen in previous decades. In its early years, the asylum housed both male and female patients, many of whom were suffering from a variety of mental health conditions, including schizophrenia, depression, and anxiety. The staff consisted of doctors, nurses, and attendants who were responsible for the daily care and treatment of the patients. However, like many other asylums, Kenmore faced the challenges of overcrowding, underfunding, and a lack of proper understanding of mental health issues. As the population of New South Wales grew, so did the number of people being admitted to the asylum. By the early 20th century, the facility was overcrowded, and the conditions inside began to deteriorate. The initial optimism about the institution's ability to provide quality care soon gave way to reports of neglect, mistreatment, and poor living conditions for the patients. As the asylum's reputation began to decline, so too did the experiences of those who lived and worked within its walls. Patients were often subjected to harsh treatment methods that were common during this period, including electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, insulin shock therapy, and hydrotherapy. In many cases, these treatments were administered without proper understanding or consent, leading to severe physical and psychological trauma for the patients. Restraints, isolation, and padded cells were also used to control patients who were considered violent or unmanageable. With these harsh conditions, Kenmore Asylum became a place of suffering and despair, and many patients died within its walls. Some were buried in the asylum cemetery, often in unmarked graves. As the death toll rose, so too did the rumors of ghostly activity and paranormal phenomena. By the mid-20th century, stories of hauntings began to circulate among the staff and local community. In 1968, Kenmore Asylum was renamed Kenmore Psychiatric Hospital, and while some improvements were made to the facility, the stigma surrounding its dark past continued to grow. As psychiatric care evolved in the latter half of the 20th century, the need for large institutions like Kenmore declined, and the asylum was eventually closed in 2003. However, the closure did not bring an end to the ghostly activity that had been reported at the site. Since its closure, Kenmore Asylum has become a hotspot for paranormal investigators, ghost hunters, and those curious about its haunted reputation. Over the years, there have been numerous reports of strange occurrences, including sightings of ghostly figures, unexplained sounds, and feelings of intense unease. Below are some of the most notable incidents and encounters associated with Kenmore Asylum. 1. The ghostly nurses. One of the most commonly reported paranormal phenomena at Kenmore Asylum is the sighting of ghostly nurses walking through the abandoned halls. Witnesses claim to have seen figures dressed in old-fashioned nursing uniforms moving silently through the building, only to disappear when approached. These apparitions are often seen near what used to be the wards where patients were housed, leading many to believe that they are the spirits of former staff members who continue to care for the patients in the afterlife. 2. The shadow figures. Visitors to the asylum have frequently reported seeing shadowy figures lurking in the darkened corners of the building. These shadow figures are often described as tall, thin, and humanoid in shape, but with no discernible features. They are said to move quickly and silently, sometimes appearing out of nowhere and vanishing just as suddenly. Some believe that these shadow figures are the spirits of former patients who are still trapped within the asylum, unable to move on from the trauma they experienced in life. 3. The sobbing woman. One of the more unsettling ghostly encounters at Kenmore Asylum involves the sound of a woman sobbing. This phenomenon has been reported by several visitors who claim to hear the sound of a woman crying softly in the distance, often in the old female wards. Despite numerous attempts to locate the source of the sound, no one has ever been able to find the woman responsible. Some believe that this is the spirit of a former patient who died in the asylum, her sorrow lingering in the building long after her death. 4. The poltergeist activity. There have also been numerous reports of poltergeist activity at Kenmore Asylum. Objects have been known to move on their own, doors slam shut without explanation, and strange knocking sounds can be heard coming from the walls. Some paranormal investigators who have visited the site claim to have been pushed or touched by an unseen force. These incidents have led many to believe that the spirits of former patients are still active within the asylum, their anger and frustration manifesting in violent ways. 5. The children's laughter. One of the more eerie phenomena reported at Kenmore Asylum is the sound of children laughing. Although the asylum was primarily for adults, there were periods when children were admitted, particularly those with developmental disabilities or behavioral issues. Visitors have claimed to hear the faint sound of children laughing or playing, despite there being no children present. These sounds are often heard near the former children's ward, which has been abandoned for many years. Over the years, a number of rumors and legends have emerged about Kenmore Asylum, many of them centered around the idea that the institution was a place of great suffering and cruelty. One persistent rumor is that doctors at the asylum conducted secret experiments on patients, using them as test subjects for unethical medical procedures. While there is little concrete evidence to support these claims, the asylum's history of questionable treatment methods has fueled these rumors. Another legend involves the asylum's underground tunnels, which were used to transport patients and supplies between different parts of the facility. It is said that these tunnels are haunted by the spirits of those who died within the asylum, and some believe that they are still active today. Paranormal investigators who have explored the tunnels have reported hearing strange noises, such as footsteps and whispers, despite being alone. 7. Kew Asylum, Victoria. The story of Kew Asylum begins in the mid-19th century, during a time when mental illness was poorly understood, and the treatment of those who suffered from it was often inhumane. In 1856, the Victorian government began construction on what was then known as the Kew Lunatic Asylum, a facility designed to house and treat people with mental illnesses. It was built on a large estate in the Kew suburb of Melbourne, overlooking the Yarra River, and featured an imposing Gothic Revival architectural style. The asylum was designed to hold around 600 patients and was part of a broader trend in the construction of large, state-run psychiatric institutions in Australia. The philosophy behind these institutions was based on the idea that patients needed to be isolated from society, placed in a controlled environment, and given treatment that included a combination of physical labor and rest. The large gardens surrounding the asylum were meant to provide a therapeutic atmosphere where patients could roam and take in fresh air. When it first opened its doors in 1871, Kew Asylum was seen as a modern, state-of-the-art facility for the treatment of mental illness. The building itself was an architectural marvel, with grand stonework, sweeping verandas, and high ceilings. It was built to be self-sufficient, with its own kitchen, laundry, and workshops for the patients. However, the early optimism about the asylum's role in the care of the mentally ill would soon be overshadowed by its harsh realities. As the population of Melbourne grew, so too did the number of people being admitted to Kew Asylum. By the late 19th century, the institution was facing severe overcrowding, and the conditions inside began to deteriorate rapidly. The peaceful environment that had been envisioned for the patients was replaced by cramped wards, insufficient staffing, and outdated treatment methods. Kew Asylum's decline marked the beginning of its haunted legacy. As overcrowding became more severe, the institution began to house not only those suffering from mental illness but also people who were considered socially undesirable. These included the homeless, the elderly, people with disabilities, and even those suffering from alcoholism. Many of these individuals were institutionalized against their will, leading to a growing sense of unrest and despair within the asylum. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the treatment of mental illness at Kew Asylum reflected the broader trends of psychiatric care at the time. Patients were subjected to treatments such as electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, insulin shock therapy, and even lobotomies, procedures that, while intended to cure, often caused permanent damage or death. The use of physical restraints, such as straitjackets and padded cells, was common, and reports of abuse and mistreatment began to surface. The asylum's mortality rate steadily increased, and many patients died within its walls, either from the treatments themselves or from neglect. Some were buried in unmarked graves in a cemetery near the asylum, their identities lost to time. This dark history of death and suffering is often cited as the reason behind the hauntings that would later be reported at the site. By the mid-20th century, Kew Asylum had gained a reputation as a place of misery and hopelessness. The conditions were appalling, and patients were often treated more like prisoners than people in need of care. This period saw an increase in reports of suicides and unexplained deaths within the asylum, further fueling rumors of paranormal activity. In the 1980s, with changing attitudes toward mental health care and the introduction of new medications and therapies, the need for large psychiatric institutions began to decline. Kew Asylum was gradually closed down, and its remaining patients were transferred to other facilities. However, the stories of hauntings and ghostly encounters would ensure that the asylum's dark legacy lived on. After its closure, Kew Asylum became a hotspot for ghost hunters, paranormal investigators, and those curious about the site's dark past. Numerous reports of strange occurrences have been documented over the years, many of them pointing to the belief that the spirits of former patients still linger within the asylum's crumbling walls. Below are some of the most notable incidents and encounters associated with Kew Asylum. 1. The Phantom Patients. One of the most commonly reported paranormal phenomena at Kew Asylum is the sighting of ghostly figures wandering through the abandoned wards. These apparitions, often described as wearing the tattered clothing of former patients, are said to appear and disappear without a trace. Witnesses report seeing these shadowy figures standing in doorways, walking down corridors, or even peering out of windows, despite the fact that the buildings have been abandoned for decades. 2. The Crying Woman. Another well-known ghost at Kew Asylum is the figure of a woman who is often heard sobbing in the old female wards. Some believe that she was a former patient who died in the asylum, possibly from mistreatment or neglect. Visitors who have ventured into the building at night claim to hear her cries echoing through the halls, growing louder as they approach, only to stop suddenly when they reach the source of the sound. Others have reported seeing a pale, translucent figure of a woman sitting in a corner, her face buried in her hands. 3. The Violent Poltergeist Activity. There have been numerous reports of poltergeist activity at Kew Asylum, particularly in the areas that house the most dangerous and disturbed patients. Doors have been known to slam shut on their own, objects are thrown across rooms, and strange knocking sounds can be heard coming from the walls. Some paranormal investigators who have explored the site have reported being pushed or shoved by an unseen force, leading many to believe that the spirits of former patients are still capable of causing harm. 4. The Unexplained Cold Spots. Many visitors to Kew Asylum have reported feeling sudden drops in temperature as they move through the building. These cold spots are often associated with areas where patients were known to have died or where particularly traumatic events occurred. Some who have experienced these temperature changes describe them as unnaturally cold, even on warm days, and they are often accompanied by a feeling of unease or dread. 5. The Children's Voices. One of the more unsettling phenomena reported at Kew Asylum is the sound of children's voices echoing through the halls. While the asylum was primarily for adults, there were periods when children were also admitted, particularly those with disabilities or behavioral issues. Visitors have claimed to hear the faint sound of children laughing or crying, despite no one else being present. These sounds are often heard near the former children's ward, which has long since been abandoned. Over the years, a number of rumors and legends have emerged about Kew Asylum, many of them centered around the idea that the institution was a place of great suffering and cruelty. One persistent rumor is that patients were subjected to secret experiments, with some claiming that doctors conducted unethical medical procedures on unwilling subjects. While there is little concrete evidence to support these claims, the asylum's history of questionable treatment practices has made these rumors difficult to dismiss entirely. Another legend involves the asylum's underground tunnels, which were once used to transport supplies and patients between different parts of the facility. It is said that these tunnels are haunted by the spirits of those who died in the asylum, and many believe that they are still active to this day. Paranormal investigators who have explored the tunnels have reported hearing strange noises, such as footsteps and whispers, despite being alone. Today, the site of Kew Asylum has been repurposed for modern use. The buildings that once housed the hospital's patients are now part of a residential development, and the grounds have been turned into public spaces. However, despite these changes, the asylum's dark past is not easily forgotten. Ghost tours and paranormal investigations are still conducted at the site, drawing in those who are curious about its haunted history. The legacy of Kew Asylum continues to captivate and terrify, with the stories of ghostly apparitions, unexplained phenomena, and lingering spirits serving as a reminder of the suffering that took place within its walls. 6. Callan Park Hospital, New South Wales. The story of Callan Park begins in 1873, when it was first established as a hospital for the mentally ill. At the time, mental illness was not well understood, and those who suffered from it were often kept in appalling conditions. Callan Park, however, represented a progressive shift in how psychiatric patients were treated in Australia. The institution was built on a sprawling, picturesque estate in Rozelle, New South Wales, and was intended to provide a peaceful, therapeutic environment for its patients. The building, known as the Kirkbride Complex, was designed by colonial architect James Barnett and featured large, open spaces, landscaped gardens, and a serene atmosphere, all part of a philosophy that believed in the healing power of nature. At its inception, Callan Park was considered a revolutionary step in psychiatric care. It was meant to be a sanctuary where patients could receive humane treatment and respite from the chaos of the outside world. The hospital's layout was modeled after similar institutions in Europe and the United States, where it was believed that open, natural surroundings could help alleviate mental distress. Despite its noble beginnings, Callan Park soon found itself overwhelmed. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the number of patients far exceeded its capacity. This overcrowding led to deteriorating conditions within the hospital. Staff were stretched thin, and the peaceful, therapeutic atmosphere that had been the original vision was lost. Patients who had once been free to roam the grounds were increasingly confined to cramped, understaffed wards. The hospital's once promising start had taken a dark turn, and it became more like the very asylums it had originally sought to reform. As the years went by, Callan Park became a place of suffering for many of its patients. The overcrowded conditions, combined with outdated and sometimes brutal treatment methods, led to a rise in deaths within the hospital. Some patients were subjected to procedures like electroshock therapy and lobotomies, common practices at the time, but now regarded as barbaric. Many of those who died within the hospital's walls were buried in unmarked graves on the grounds, their identities lost to time. It is believed that the sheer amount of human suffering and death that occurred at Callan Park contributed to the site's eventual reputation as a haunted location. By the mid-20th century, the hospital had become synonymous with misery and despair. Patients who were able to leave often spoke of the terrible conditions they had endured, while others never had the chance to escape. As psychiatric care evolved in the late 20th century, Callan Park became increasingly obsolete. New medications and treatments meant that fewer patients required long-term institutional care, and the hospital's population dwindled. In 1994, Callan Park Hospital for the Insane was officially closed, and the remaining patients were transferred to other facilities. However, despite its closure, the hospital's dark history remained, and so did the stories of hauntings. Over the years, Callan Park has become a hotspot for paranormal investigators, ghost hunters, and thrill seekers. The abandoned buildings, long since left to decay, have an eerie atmosphere that lends itself to ghostly legends. Several specific incidents and encounters have been reported, each adding to the haunted reputation of the hospital. 1. The screams in the night. One of the most frequently reported phenomena at Callan Park is the sound of disembodied screams echoing through the empty buildings at night. These cries are said to be the voices of former patients, still trapped in the anguish and torment they experienced during their time at the hospital. Visitors who have explored the site at night claim to hear these screams coming from the old wards, despite the fact that the buildings have been abandoned for decades. 2. The woman in white. Another well-known ghostly figure at Callan Park is the apparition of a woman in white. She is often seen wandering the grounds of the hospital, particularly near the former female wards. Witnesses describe her as having a sad, distant expression, as though she is searching for something, or someone, she has lost. Some believe that she was a former patient who died in the hospital and is now doomed to roam the grounds for eternity. 3. The shadowy figures in the Kirkbride Complex. The Kirkbride Complex, which was once the heart of Callan Park's operations, is now a place where many have reported seeing shadowy figures moving through the halls. These dark, featureless shapes are often seen darting around corners or standing silently in doorways before vanishing without a trace. Paranormal investigators who have explored the Kirkbride complex have reported feeling a sense of being watched or followed, even when no one else is around. 4. The poltergeist activity. In addition to apparitions, there have also been numerous reports of poltergeist activity at Callan Park. Doors have been known to slam shut on their own, objects move seemingly of their own accord, and lights flicker on and off despite there being no electricity running through the abandoned buildings. Some investigators believe that these incidents are caused by the restless spirits of patients who are still trapped in the hospital. 5. The ghosts of the solitary cells. Callan Park was known for its use of solitary confinement as a form of punishment for particularly troublesome patients. These tiny, windowless cells were a place of immense suffering, and many patients who were confined there were driven to madness. Today, visitors who enter these cells report feeling an overwhelming sense of dread and claustrophobia. Some have even claimed to see the spirits of former patients still locked inside, their faces twisted in agony. Over the years, many rumors and legends have sprung up around Callan Park. One persistent rumor is that the hospital was the site of secret, unethical medical experiments. According to some stories, patients were subjected to dangerous and experimental treatments without their consent, leading to a number of deaths. While there is little evidence to support these claims, the hospital's history of mistreatment and abuse has made these rumors difficult to dismiss. Another legend involves the hospital's underground tunnels. It is said that these tunnels, which were once used to transport supplies and patients between different parts of the hospital, are now haunted by the ghosts of those who died within the hospital's walls. Paranormal investigators who have ventured into the tunnels report hearing strange noises, such as footsteps and voices, despite being completely alone. Today, the site of Callan Park is a public park, and many of the original hospital buildings have been repurposed for other uses. However, the hospital's dark history is not easily forgotten. Ghost tours are held on the site, drawing in visitors who are curious about the haunted legacy of the hospital. Paranormal investigators continue to explore the abandoned wards, searching for evidence of the spirits that are said to remain. 5. Fremantle Lunatic Asylum, Western Australia. It holds 5th position in top 10 most haunted hospitals in Australia. It has been already discussed in my other video made on Australia's most haunted places. The link is in description. Please visit that video for all details about Fremantle Lunatic Asylum. 4. Royal Adelaide Hospital, South Australia. The story of the Royal Adelaide Hospital begins in 1840 when it was first established as the Adelaide Hospital. Located in the heart of the city, it was designed to provide medical care to the growing population of Adelaide. At the time, Adelaide was a bustling settlement in the early years of European colonization, and with the influx of immigrants, there was a growing need for proper medical facilities. The original hospital was much smaller than the modern-day complex we know today. It consisted of a few basic wards and a small staff, but over time, it expanded to accommodate the city's growing population. The hospital's early years were marked by rudimentary medical practices, as doctors and nurses dealt with a variety of illnesses and injuries using the limited knowledge and technology available at the time. As the years went by, the hospital grew in both size and stature. It underwent several expansions and modernizations, particularly during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The hospital became a leader in medical care, offering cutting-edge treatments and services to patients from across South Australia. However, with the hospital's expansion came an increase in the number of patients, many of whom were gravely ill or suffering from terminal conditions. Over the years, thousands of people passed away within its walls, many of them in pain and distress. This long history of suffering, death, and tragedy is believed by some to have left an indelible mark on the hospital, creating the conditions for what would later become a hotspot for paranormal activity. While the Royal Adelaide Hospital's reputation as a world-class medical institution is undisputed, it has also earned a darker reputation over the years as one of the most haunted places in South Australia. As the hospital grew older, stories of strange occurrences and ghostly encounters began to emerge. Some believe that the countless deaths that occurred in the hospital have led to restless spirits remaining within its walls, unable to find peace. The hospital's haunting history gained momentum after several high-profile renovations and demolitions occurred on the site. These changes are believed by some to have disturbed the spirits of those who died there, leading to an increase in paranormal activity. In particular, the demolition of certain old wards and the construction of new buildings are said to have stirred up ghostly energy, with more reports of hauntings following these events. The Royal Adelaide Hospital is home to a variety of ghostly encounters and eerie stories. Visitors, staff, and patients alike have reported experiencing strange phenomena, ranging from the feeling of being watched to full-blown apparitions. Here are some of the most notable incidents and encounters that have contributed to the hospital's haunted reputation. 1. The Grey Nurse. One of the most famous spirits at the Royal Adelaide Hospital is that of the Grey Nurse. This apparition is believed to be the ghost of a nurse who worked at the hospital many years ago. She is often seen wearing an old-fashioned nursing uniform and is described as having a kind, calming presence. Many people claim to have seen her walking through the corridors at night, particularly in the older parts of the hospital. Some have even reported that she tends to patients, checking on them before disappearing without a trace. What makes the story of the Grey Nurse so intriguing is that she is not considered a malevolent spirit. Instead, she is thought to be a benevolent presence, continuing to care for the sick even in death. Despite her calming demeanor, however, her sudden appearances can still be quite unnerving for those who encounter her. 2. The Ghost in the Elevator. Another frequently reported haunting at the Royal Adelaide Hospital involves a mysterious figure that appears in one of the hospital's elevators. Over the years, numerous staff members and visitors have reported entering the elevator alone, only to feel a cold breeze and hear strange noises as if someone else is in the elevator with them. On occasion, people have seen a shadowy figure standing in the corner of the elevator, only to disappear when the doors open. This particular haunting has been reported in various parts of the hospital, but it is most often associated with the older wings, where many deaths occurred during the hospital's long history. Some believe that the ghostly figure in the elevator is the spirit of a former patient who passed away in the hospital and is now trapped between worlds, unable to leave. 3. The Children's Ward Apparitions. The Children's Ward at the Royal Adelaide Hospital has its own set of ghostly tales. Several staff members and visitors have reported seeing the ghosts of children in the ward, particularly at night. These apparitions are often described as playful and mischievous, with some reports of toys being moved around, lights flickering, and the sound of children's laughter echoing through the halls. One particularly chilling story involves a nurse who was working a night shift when she saw a young boy sitting on one of the hospital beds. The nurse approached the boy, assuming he was a patient who had wandered out of his room. However, as she got closer, the boy vanished before her eyes. Shaken by the experience, the nurse later learned that the bed where the boy had been sitting had once belonged to a child who had died in the hospital many years earlier. 4. The Morgue Hauntings. As with many old hospitals, the morgue at the Royal Adelaide Hospital is a focal point for paranormal activity. The morgue, which housed the bodies of those who passed away at the hospital, is said to be one of the most haunted areas on the site. Staff members have reported hearing strange noises, such as banging and footsteps, coming from the morgue late at night when no one is supposed to be there. One particularly eerie tale involves a security guard who was patrolling the hospital one night. As he passed by the morgue, he heard a loud knocking sound coming from inside. When he opened the door to investigate, he found the room empty, but the knocking continued, seemingly coming from the cold storage units where the bodies were kept. The guard, understandably spooked, quickly left the area, but the experience left a lasting impression on him. In addition to the many first-hand accounts of ghostly encounters, the Royal Adelaide Hospital is also the subject of numerous rumors and legends. One of the most persistent rumors is that the hospital was built on top of an ancient Aboriginal burial ground, and that this has contributed to the paranormal activity on the site. While there is no concrete evidence to support this claim, the idea that the hospital is built on sacred ground has fueled speculation and added to the eerie atmosphere of the location. Another legend involves the hospital's old surgical theaters, where many life-saving and life-ending operations took place. Some believe that the spirits of those who died on the operating table still linger in these rooms, their souls trapped by the trauma of their final moments. Surgeons and nurses who have worked in these theaters have reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread or unease, as if they are being watched by unseen eyes. The Royal Adelaide Hospital has undergone significant changes over the years, including the construction of a new, modern facility that replaced the original hospital in 2017. The old hospital buildings, many of which had stood for over a century, were decommissioned and slated for redevelopment. However, even with the shift to a new site, the haunted history of the hospital has not been forgotten. The old hospital site remains a place of interest for paranormal investigators and ghost enthusiasts, many of whom believe that the spirits of the past still linger in the abandoned wards and hallways. Ghost tours of the old Royal Adelaide Hospital have become popular, with visitors eager to experience the haunted history for themselves. While the new hospital is a state-of-the-art facility, free from the eerie atmosphere of the old buildings, the legacy of the Royal Adelaide Hospital as one of South Australia's most haunted locations endures. The stories of the grey nurse, the elevator ghost, the children's ward apparitions, and the morgue hauntings continue to captivate and terrify those who visit or work in the area. 3. Quarantine Station, Sydney, New South Wales. It holds third position in top 10 most haunted hospitals in Australia. It has been already discussed in my other video made on Australia's most haunted places. The link is in description. Please visit that video for all details about Quarantine Station. 2. Beechworth Lunatic Asylum, Victoria. It holds second position in top 10 most haunted hospitals in Australia. It has been already discussed in my other video made on Australia's most haunted places. The link is in description. Please visit that video for all details about Beechworth Lunatic Asylum. 1. Aradale Lunatic Asylum, Victoria. The Aradale Lunatic Asylum, originally known simply as Aradale Lunatic Asylum, was opened in 1867. At the time, mental health care was far from what we know today. The asylum was built during an era when those suffering from mental illness were often ostracized and hidden away from society. Aradale was constructed to serve as a solution for housing Victoria's increasing number of mentally ill patients. Alongside Kew Asylum and Beechworth Asylum, it became one of the largest mental health facilities in Australia, housing up to 1,000 patients at its peak. Aradale's imposing buildings were designed to reflect the Victorian ideals of mental health care. With long, dark hallways and isolation rooms, the architecture was functional but intimidating. The asylum was designed to be self-sufficient, complete with kitchens, a chapel, and even a morgue. Life inside the asylum was bleak. Patients were often subjected to harsh treatments, including electroshock therapy, hydrotherapy, and lobotomies. It wasn't uncommon for patients to be kept in isolation for extended periods or subjected to restraints. Mental illness at the time was poorly understood, and as a result, many patients were admitted for reasons that would be considered mild or even irrelevant today, such as depression or anxiety. Others were admitted for more severe conditions, but the treatment options were limited and often brutal. Many of the asylum's patients were doomed to live out the remainder of their lives within the asylum walls, often forgotten by society and even their own families. Over the decades, thousands of patients passed away within Aradale, with estimates suggesting that over 13,000 people died there during its operation. These deaths, many of them under tragic circumstances, would later become the foundation for the asylum's haunted reputation. Aradale officially closed its doors as an asylum in 1998 after serving over 130 years as a mental health facility. By this time, mental health care had changed significantly, and the old methods of treatment were considered archaic and inhumane. However, while the asylum ceased operations, its reputation as a haunted location only grew stronger. Soon after the closure, stories began to surface about strange occurrences within the abandoned buildings. Visitors, particularly those conducting paranormal investigations, reported a range of eerie phenomena. People claimed to hear disembodied voices, footsteps echoing through empty halls, and doors slamming shut without explanation. Some even reported seeing shadowy figures and ghostly apparitions wandering the asylum's corridors. The most notable of these entities is believed to be Nurse Carrie, a former nurse who worked at the asylum. She is said to haunt the women's wing of the building, often appearing as a shadowy figure or as a cold presence felt by visitors. Other spirits are believed to include former patients, whose restless souls have remained trapped within the walls of Aradale. One of the most chilling aspects of Aradale is the number of encounters reported by both visitors and paranormal investigators. Over the years, many people have experienced unexplained sensations and frightening occurrences that seem to defy rational explanation. 1. The ghost of Nurse Carrie. As previously mentioned, Nurse Carrie is one of the most frequently encountered spirits at Aradale. It is said that she worked in the women's ward during her time at the asylum and was deeply devoted to her patients. Many believe that her spirit has remained behind, still caring for the souls of those who perished in the asylum. Visitors have reported feeling cold spots in the women's wing, hearing faint whispers, and seeing a shadowy figure, all attributed to Nurse Carrie. 2. The children's ward. Another area of Aradale that has left a lasting impression on visitors is the children's ward. Though children were not common patients at the asylum, there were instances where younger individuals were housed here due to mental conditions or being deemed incorrigible by society. The laughter of children has been heard in the ward, despite the area being long abandoned. Some visitors even claim to have seen small figures darting in and out of the shadows. 3. The J Ward. The J Ward, initially used as a high-security wing for criminally insane male patients, has long been associated with some of the most intense paranormal activity at Aradale. Visitors have reported hearing footsteps in empty hallways and loud bangs echoing through the building. Some believe that the spirits of former patients who were wrongfully admitted or subjected to terrible treatment still haunt the J Ward. 4. The Aradale Morgue. The asylum's morgue is another hotspot for paranormal activity. Many bodies pass through this room, some of which were never claimed by family members. Paranormal investigators have reported hearing metallic clanging, as if the old mortuary equipment were still in use. Visitors have also reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread in the morgue, with some even fainting upon entering. 5. Encounters by paranormal investigators. Many teams of paranormal investigators have ventured into Aradale over the years, each with their own stories of strange happenings. One investigator reported feeling as though someone was walking alongside them, despite being alone in the room. Others have experienced electronic malfunctions, with cameras and recording devices shutting off unexpectedly or capturing strange images and voices. Aradale's haunted reputation has also been fueled by numerous rumors and legends that have emerged over the years. One such legend involves the so-called murderer's ward, where it is said that some of the most dangerous patients were kept. According to local lore, one of the patients in this ward was a man convicted of multiple murders, and his spirit is believed to haunt the building to this day. Some say his presence can be felt through a sudden drop in temperature or a feeling of being watched. Another rumor surrounds the death of a staff member who supposedly died under mysterious circumstances within the asylum. Though there are no official records of this incident, many believe that the spirit of this staff member now roams the halls, seeking justice for their untimely death. There are also stories of a head doctor who was particularly cruel to the patients. Legend has it that his spirit remains trapped in the asylum as punishment for the suffering he caused during his life. Visitors who have explored the old administrative areas have reported seeing a shadowy figure believed to be the doctor, pacing the halls as if still in charge. Today, Aradale Lunatic Asylum is one of Australia's most popular paranormal attractions. The asylum offers ghost tours, where visitors can explore the eerie buildings and hear about the many stories of hauntings and strange occurrences. The ghost tours have become so popular that Aradale has gained international recognition as one of the world's most haunted locations. Despite the macabre nature of these tours, they serve as a way to remember the many lives that passed through Aradale's doors. It is a sobering reminder of the harsh realities faced by those with mental illness in the past and a testament to how far mental health care has come.